Good morning. Thank you all for joining in today. I'm Shakitha Owens, Director of the Hope Ministry here at Antioch Christian Fellowship. And September is Suicide Awareness Month. And so, what we're doing today, we have a group of awesome professionalists and panelists that are going to come in and we're going to talk about suicide. And hopefully, we can share something that will be able to help you. We're focusing on our young adults, bringing information to them because we know that this world that we live in is bringing all different type of obstacles and things their way. So we want to make sure that we are providing them with education and the parents as well with information to be able to help during these stressful times that we're living in. And so I am going to start by introducing our panelists. We have Mr. Darius Mobley and Miss Alexis Walker. So I'm going to share their some quick information, their bios on them, and then we will get started. So Mr. Darius Mobley is from Houston, Texas, and he is the middle child of five. His wife is Angel Mobley, and they are expecting their first child, which is going to be a girl. So, congratulations, Darius.
Thank you.
He has a BS in psychology from the University of North Texas, and he is currently pursuing his Master's of Science in Kinesiology with an emphasis on sports psychology. That's awesome. He's also expecting to graduate in the spring of 2024. Currently, Mr. Mobley is working at Denton County MHMR, and which is a mental health facility for those that don't know that service children and adults with their mental health. He works as a child and an adolescent case manager, and he's also a qualified mental health professional with 18 months of experience. So thank you, Mr. Mobley. Awesome background, and we are so glad to have you here on the panel today.
Thank
We
you.
have Miss Alexis Walker, and Miss Alexis is a licensed mental health therapist. She works with both adolescents and adults in a clinical setting. She received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Houston in 2018, her Master of Science from the University of North Texas at Dallas in Clinical Mental Health Counseling in 2021, and she is currently working on her PhD in Counseling, Education, and Supervision at Texas A&M University at Commerce. So congratulations. Ms. Walker has a passion for advocating for mental health services and resources to be made available to the Black community, and she continues to work diligently towards reducing stigmas associated with mental health. So, welcome, Miss Alexis Walker. We are glad to have you here
Thank
on
you.
our panel today. Good morning, Miss Meeks. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. So, we are just introducing our panelists, and so we're going to go ahead and we're going to introduce Miss Jessica Meeks. Miss Meeks has a BA in psychology. She is a QMHP case manager as well. She currently serves as a rehabilitation specialist with Denton County MHMR. Previously, Jessica has worked with a variety of different populations, including sex trafficking, and she has also worked with autistic and special needs adults, dementia patients, and a broad scope of mental ill individuals. Jessica also works as a research assistant in University of North Texas Neurocognitive Research Lab, where she assists in conducting psychological studies and presents the lab's research findings in various conferences. In the future, Jessica plans to pursue her PhD in clinical psychology. Awesome, Jessica. Awesome background. Thank you guys again so much for joining us here on the panel. And so, as you guys can see, we got individuals with a wealth of knowledge when it comes to mental health. And so, we're just going to get started because we want to provide you with all of the wealth of this knowledge and great information that we have here on this panel today. And so I'm going to start out with you, Miss Alexis Walker. And I just want to ask, as a mental health expert, can you share some insights into the challenges that young adults commonly face that can lead to feelings of hopelessness and thoughts of self harm?
Yes.
So, from what I have witnessed, over my time in the profession, a lot of the hopelessness that I've witnessed has come from stressful situations where there's a lot of change happening all at once. There's a lot of newness taking place, and having to process and having to adjust to that newness can sometimes become overwhelming, especially within our young adults, where there has been this quote unquote way of life supposed to live where you graduate high school, you go to college, you get the
Mhm.
job, you pay, and you're supposed to get married, and you're supposed to have kids. But what happens if I don't go to college and I have a kid first? Or what happens if marriage never comes and now there's this stress of, okay, life is not falling into place of the society's expectations of what I'm supposed to do. And that is oftentimes stressful for them, where it's like, okay, society has its expectations of who I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do, but there's no how do I get there? How am I supposed to get there? And when youth and young adults feel like they're lacking, that's where that okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Am I enough comes into place, and we witness that hopelessness or those lack of coping skills where we're now engaging in substance abuse. We're now engaging in maybe being in sexual activity with individuals we don't need to be engaging with. We run into those quote unquote unhealthy coping skills
Mhm.
where we're trying to navigate life, or they're trying to navigate life, and there's no easy fix in how we go about life. So I think that's something that I've witnessed, where there are these life transitions that are taking place, and they're taking place so quickly, and it's like, okay, how do I adjust from, you know, last year I was 18 in high school. Now society says I'm a young adult and I'm supposed to live life as an adult, but I was in home period all of a year ago, and then having to navigate adulthood with or without the support of family, friends, and things like that. So I really would say stressful situations and of course life transitions have been some of the challenges that cause that hopelessness and cause that that leading up to self harm, and then of course from the young adults that we have just recently, the pandemic definitely took a toll on how we navigate and how individuals navigate interaction, whether that be within the professional world, within the personal, because that was a year of life that was like on standby, a year of life that was within the house, and still having to then immerse back into society. Let's forget a whole pandemic took place. Let's forget thousands plus people died from this, and immerse back into
Mhm.
society and be normal again. That's also another challenge that I've witnessed.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Alexis. And I really think that, what you shared about, just the whole, what society, just that whole American dream, you go to school, you go through all of these steps, you graduate, you get a job. And the truth of the matter is that all of that looks different right now in this generation. And so I think it's so important for our parents who are listening to just sit down and talk, talk to your young adults and just see what their thought processes are, because it looks different. I mean, I hear a lot of times, even just as a therapist, from some of my young adults, like, college ain't for me. College ain't for everybody. Like, that's the main thing you hear them saying. And so, okay, if college is not for everybody, let's talk about what are your plans, and what does that look like. So thank you so much for sharing that. And so, with that being said, I'm just gonna I'm gonna chime in with Jessica, and I just want to ask you, Jessica, what are some of the key signs that someone may be struggling with thoughts of suicide, and how can we recognize and respond to these signs?
So I would say probably the main sign would be reclusiveness, trying to distance yourself from others. And then you have the generic signs, the giving away prized possessions, the um, not wanting to engage with others, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of it um, really comes with engaging in deep, meaningful relationships with others. Whenever you see someone start to pull away, someone not want to spend time with you, or want to nurture personal relationships, friends, family, that kind of thing, typically is when they feel like they're heading towards suicide, towards self-harm. Just being a social species, humans are drawn to each other. And if we're thinking about suicide, we don't want to hurt people that are close to us. So whenever those thoughts start to come into their head, people tend to isolate. And mental health and mental illness is not an easy thing to be around. And so a lot of times, friends and family, trying to be well-intentioned, don't really know how to approach someone or handle that. And so they choose to ignore it rather than kind of pursue what might be a difficult conversation to have a better outcome. So whenever that person starts pulling away, is typically one of the primary signs, I would say, in my experience, that I've seen before people self-harm or have a suicide attempt.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Jessica. And it sounds like that the biggest thing that we need to pay attention to is just listening and being in tune with our young adults. And again, just being there to be a listener, so that you can create that safe place so that they can be able to pour out and share those things with you. But even just seeing, like you said, the signs, giving away their possessions and all of those things, just being in tune and paying attention to what they're doing is so important. So thank you for sharing that. And so I think that sometimes, like you said, Jessica, even with family members and friends, like sometimes they just don't know what to say. They don't know how to have that conversation. And so therefore, a lot of times our young adults, they're not eager to step in and even ask for help or even start that conversation up. And so, Mr. Darius, I just want to ask you, like, is it okay to ask for help when feeling down? And even if it feels hard to do so, how can we start that conversation and help our young adults start that conversation with somebody that they trust?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I believe creating a safe space for them, as in if I'm a trusted person, say the child is trying to talk to their parent, the parent has to allow that child to express how they exactly feel so that you can understand where they stand. I wanted to bring up one thing as far as like suicide. There's a different term that we also associate is passive thoughts of death. So working with children, they sometimes will say something like, "Oh, I don't want to live anymore," or "I don't mind getting hit by a car today." Those are passive thoughts of death where they are thinking about something, but they don't have a plan. They don't have an intent. And that's the difference between someone thinking about suicide. They would typically have an intent. They sometimes will actually say that they want to kill themselves. So being direct with someone and allowing them to say how they exactly feel, you'll get a good gauge of where they're standing in that moment. And it's good to be present with them so that they're able to say if it's past thoughts of death, we're going to go down this route and talk about it. If it's suicide, then I'm here to make you feel safe in the moment. And then giving them hope as far as you feel like this today, and I hope that we can change that as we go forward. So being their support system is important, being their team player.
All right. Thank you for that. And this is a question that I would like for each of you to answer, because I think that just that whole everything that you just shared at the end, Darius, about the different types, the different the way that it looks, when somebody it has a thought, or whether it's ideation or whether it's active, and what that looks like. And I've heard it so many different ways until sometimes, even as a professional, it becomes confusing, because you're really not sure if it's an actual thought that they're having, if they're hearing voices, is it I just don't want to be here, or what would it look like, if my family, maybe they just don't want me here. Just all of these different thought processes that come along with that. And I would just like for each of you to just kind of share maybe an experience that you had with someone, and what did that look like? Like, I mean, did any confusion come up for you? Like, were you trying to figure out, like, okay, where are we? And you guys can
Um,
just have one.
um, I think probably the first experience that I, had with an adolescent per se, where they were experiencing those suicidal thoughts. It was more so kind of what I call the seriously joking, where it was like, I'm okay if I don't wake up tomorrow, like LOL, adding a little LOL or laugh to it. And then I had to kind of pose the question, I was like, well, you often say this, or bringing this up casually. Are you experiencing those thoughts? Are you wanting to wanting to harm yourself? Because as a therapist, I can't take it lightly, even if a LOL or a little haha is, at the end of it, I have to take what you're seriously. So for me in that situation, I had to come with that adolescent. When we start using that, sayings like that, although you're not saying suicide directly, for someone on the outside looking in, that's hinting and alluding to. And there are precautions that we have to take in order for you to be safe and not harm yourself. Um, and once we had that conversation, then then the thing like, okay, I can joke about this, because there are
Mhm.
individuals who truly feel this way, who are actively this way. So the seriously joking, lighthearted about, oh, today I just didn't want to wake up, or like I wish I could wake up. Those are not terms and phrases that we just lightly. Now, if you want to say, okay, I had a bad day, I didn't want to get out of bed, that's a different situation. But
Yes.
how we phrase and we, coin certain phrases cause need for just being on high alert with a particular young adult, and something that I often encourage when I'm working with not posing the question why when we are running into, let's just say, a who's considered suicide, self-harm. Well, why would you want to kill yourself? That automatically poses judgment, to where that individual who thought they had a safe now going to shut down and more reserved in regards to what they do share and how to approach these conversations about their mental health. Because I'm just, well, why would you want to do that? Like, I don't understand. And you have this perfect life, you have this, you have that, why would you want to do that? And oftentimes when it comes to a person experiencing suicidal ideation, it's not the materialistic things that they're caught up in, it's what's on the inside that they're struggling. So when sex area mentioned, not posing judgment, the moment we pose judgment, being that mental health is something that is still very new and something that people are still trying to understand, that it's mental health. When pose judgment, it causes division, causes that all, as Jessica was mentioning, where people don't feel comfortable talking about mental health. So,
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Anybody else would like to share on that?
Yeah, I think it's also important just when having this discussion to realize we think of a certain type of people being the ones to commit suicide, um, but in reality, it is something that affects everyone to some extent. But when looking for those signs and kind of dealing with those situations, um, in the past, I have had experiences working with male victims of sex trafficking. And one of our patients, it was at a residential treatment facility, but one of our patients was special needs. He was very, very much autistic, very ADHD, bipolar, trauma, a whole array of things. But he was special needs. He had a lower IQ. And a lot of times I think it's easy for us to say, oh, he would never do something like that, and kind of think of it as maybe the people with a higher IQ or a higher understanding, when in reality he did try to commit suicide multiple times. And it was one of those things too, being autistic. He did not present, I would say, normally how we would see someone. He pretty much, it was a God thing. I was walking past his room and I heard him talking to himself, and he said something of, I should just not be here. And I stopped and I waited outside his room, and then I peeked in and he was trying to strangle himself. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh. And just the timing of it was so, I mean, definitely a blessing that I was able to hear that and kind of go with my gut and be able to stop. And I think just a lot of it is just about being present in the moment and being observant of the people around us, because there's always signs. And a lot of times it's easy after someone passes for us to go, oh, this makes sense, or that makes sense, or there were all these signs. And in the moment, I think it's very easy for just us as people to get very caught up in what we're doing with our own lives, to not really be able to pay attention to what other people are going through. Because people communicate, even if it's not verbally, even if it's not, hey, I want to kill myself, or making jokes like Alexis was talking about. There's always some form of communication there. And I think that it's then our job, just as people and as supporters of that person, to really hone in and try to pick up on any little discrepancies, even if it's not, I want to kill myself, even if it's not something super obvious, just little things, being able to kind of try to be in tune with the people around us, and, always assume that you never know the severity of something. Even if it's a small comment, a small joke, small gesture, we never know fully what those emotions behind that are, or the intensity of those emotions, unless we are that person. So just being able to check in even on the little things, and not assuming that, oh, this is the kind of person that would commit suicide, or this is the kind of person that struggles with that, because there isn't a specific type. It's everyone. You never know what someone might be going through, even if they present in a way different than what you have stereotyped.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that, Jessica. Did you want to share on that, Mr. Darius?
Yeah, just a little bit. I would just say some of the clients that I've worked with, I mainly work with boys from ages 4 to 17, and they will do the jokes like Miss Walker said. Sometimes they will just get in a agitated mood or be angry, and then the parent will say um, he will say something like, "Oh, I just wish I wouldn't be here anymore. I just given up." And I would pause and talk to the parent and say, in these moments, take them seriously in the fact that when they're joking, there might be some truth to it. So making a different stance and saying, all right, well, I see that you're getting angry, and there might be a better way to express your anger versus saying something that you don't actually mean. Because when you say that in our setting, working at MHMR, we take that seriously, whether it's a joke or not. And it's a education moment for the parent and for the child to understand that suicide has been rising over the few years, and especially in that demographic of being a young boy or girl. We can't take anything lightly nowadays, really, because a child might be playing around one day and then they have a plan the next day. So not taking nothing lightly is important.
Okay. That's good. And I'm just going to throw in there, along with that, Darius, that one of the things that I have seen, and I know this may sound ugly, it may sound crazy, but I've actually seen it and I've heard it, where a child has continuously been saying, I'm going to do this to myself, and I'm going to kill myself, and I don't want to be here. And the parents are so tired of hearing it, until they just encourage them and say, well, I'm tired of listening to this. I'm tired of hearing this. You keep saying you're going to go kill yourself. Go do it. Go jump off the bridge. Go do these things. And I've heard parents say things like that. And so I think what you just shared about just coming in and explaining to the parent where they are in that moment is so important. And parents, please don't do that. I mean, I know sometimes there's anger, there's frustration because you are tired of hearing those things over and over again, but you never know when that turning point is going to be. So don't encourage self-harm. And I just wanted to share that because I've seen it and I've heard it. Of course, CPS was already involved, but I've seen it and I've heard it, and it's just not a good. It's not a good thing. And I just want to to ask you, Miss Alexis, statistic wise, because we know that the statistics are changing every day when it comes to suicide within our young adults, and them attempting suicide versus actually completing suicide. Do you know if there's any statistics out there that can help us with that?
Yes. So, according to the World Health Organization, on average, yearly, 700,000 people actually complete suicide. And for every one suicide, there are 12 individuals that have attempted suicide. So, oftentimes, those individuals who have attempt, most times people don't even know that they attempt or had at some point tried to take their life. When it comes to suicide within young adults, um, is the fourth leading cause of death for individuals between the age of to 29. So we see that within that age group where we're adolescents to that young adulthood, and it's the second leading cause of death when it comes to 14-year-olds. So entering into teenage years. With those statistics, a jump that I did notice is from 2000 to 2020, there was a 36% increase in suicides, the suicide rate, due to multitude of things. We're dealing with a lot in regards to our society where things have taken a toll on individuals. It was kind of that mark of the pandemic, and a lot of individuals struggle financially, struggle socially, where jobs were being lost, jobs weren't kept because everything for working from home, and now out of a job or a job position has been eliminated. That causes a lot of frustration and internal, just conflict and turmoil where I lived the life that I'm used to. This has abruptly stopped the life that I'm used to. We're dealing with the impact of that. So it has been a percent increase between years 2000 and 2020. When it comes to individuals who have completed versus who have thought of suicide, in 2021, 12.3 million people thought about suicide. Survey they thought about it, and with passive thoughts, active thoughts had thought about it. Of those 12.3, 3.5 actually attempted suicide, whether that be overdose, self-inflict, self-harm, trying to do self-inflicted wound. From that 3.5, 1. So those statistics are very scary, but it's very real. Because I think oftentimes when we address it's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. The uncomfortable conversation at the dinner table that people often try to avoid, and the only time it is brought up is a celebrity that has taken life or we see it in the news, and now there's this kind of urgency, mental health awareness, and now we have to have this uncomfortable conversation. But the reality is, it needs to be a conversation on. So when a young adult, whether that's your teenager in college or your young adult that's now in college, experiencing thoughts and feelings, they don't have to be hush hush and uncomfortable about it because mom and dad didn't want to talk about it. So
Wow, 36%. That's a lot. That's a lot. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing those numbers. And so, with that being said, I just want to because I know, Jessica, you mentioned earlier about like there's like no certain type that may, be at risk for suicide. Can you share like what role does stigma play in preventing those open conversations? Because I think we talked to Mr. Darius as well, but is there a stigma that we need to really, some stigmas that we really need to be looking at that may prevent those conversations about mental health and suicide? And I think even Miss Alexis just commented, briefly about it is, but how can we combat that?
So I think that yes, there definitely is a lot of stigmas, a lot of negative stigmas that are attached to people that struggle with suicidal thoughts. People think, oh, they're crazy, or oh, they're super alternative. Maybe they're emo, that kind of thing. But then I think a lot of it too boils down to the people around that loved one, those parents, those family members, those friends. Whenever we see someone commit suicide, it's easy for us to go, oh, their parents must not have been doing that good of a job, or that kind of thing. A lot of the blame goes to the people that are around that person. And so I think that that is a big stigma that affects when and who chooses to commit suicide. And it affects a lot of those conversations, right? If I'm a young adult and I'm struggling with suicide, and I know that my parents are going to take it as a reflection of their job raising me, then I'm not going to want to share that with them. And so rather than seeing it as, a mental illness or a mental health struggle, a lot of times it gets kind of misconstrued, and it gets interpreted as someone in that person's life didn't support them the way that they needed to be supported. When in reality, it's a whole lot of things, a whole lot of little things. And so someone who commits suicide doesn't mean that their parents did a bad job, doesn't mean that their partner wasn't a great partner, doesn't mean that they didn't have a good job, doesn't mean their choice to, self-harm, to attempt suicide, is something that is usually internalized by them. And if it's not shared, there's nothing we can do. So kind of encouraging those safe spaces, right? Of, if you're struggling with this, I want to know so I can help you. Not that, oh, you're an embarrassment because you're struggling with suicide, or, oh, you're, I don't want I think being raised very Southern Baptist, I think my experiences growing up is like, oh, well, we don't want our kid to be the one that everyone talks about because they had to go to the mental hospital. Or, oh, what are we doing wrong as parents because our kid is having these struggles? And so I think a lot of times those negative stereotypes can really affect our ability to check in with our loved ones and be comfortable having that conversation, because we're scared. What if they do say that they are struggling? Then what do I do next?
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of just having a solid education, a solid plan in place of, I want to have this safe space. I want to encourage those conversations rather than they better not struggle with that because I don't want to be judged, or I don't want to be, seen as the bad parent. And I think a lot of times that those kind of stereotypes and those views can really affect people who are struggling with their decision to open up about it, because they don't want to be a burden.
Okay.
And so they suffer quietly rather than being more open. And I think that those stereotypes of the people that would commit suicide as being crazy, or being their lives are horrible, or that kind of thing is very very misleading. And I think it hinders a lot of potentially impactful conversations that could be shared with that person prior to that tipping point.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And so, Jessica, what is it something, is there anything that you could tell, like maybe a parent that may be watching that child has already completed suicide, that went through all of that and right now experiencing the guilt from it?
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's never your fault. So it's very difficult. And I think even just being a professional in this field, it's very difficult being a parent of someone who has a mental illness or has those struggles to want to blame ourselves whenever something goes wrong. You know, whenever I have a client that commits suicide, whenever a parent has a child, that's a lot to have to go through. And it's never something that we should be blaming ourselves about. Um, Now, I do believe it's important that we try to have those conversations beforehand. But ultimately, you know, that person's actions are their decisions, and their decisions obviously impacted by mental health, by whatever needs they have. But I think that it's important that when someone does commit suicide, we don't try to run and blame ourselves, because I know that suicide rates are higher amongst people who have lost loved ones to suicide. So a lot of times that guilt and that hurt and that grief can very easily build up into something very, very harmful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is important that we, in those times, try to find community and find some factors that'll help us get through those hard times without placing all of the blame on ourselves.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. And I think that that is the hardest part, is the guilt that comes along with it. Um, and Mr. Darius, I just want to ask you, working with, you know, those age groups that you work with, when you notice that someone is displaying some of these signs that we've talked about when it comes to suicide, or they're having suicide thoughts, um, what things have you seen that have been helpful, that you've maybe done to be able to help out? I know you talked about bringing the parents to the side, setting them aside and talking with them. Are there any other things that you feel like that have been helpful in that area?
Yeah, so part of our protocol is that we have a recovery plan, which is um, the client and the parent's way to build a plan that is rooted in helping the client. And it's about them getting some support system, people they can think of, some warning triggers and signs that the client might have some feelings of suicide, or might have a plan coming. And then also just having that professional help as well. Maybe they haven't had a counselor, or they need to continually receive counseling. And if they're on medications, they're taking that. But also a step further is just putting them in an environment that is lifting them up, and possibly building some more coping skills. I really love to work out, which is like just getting some physical exercise. That does your body and mind good. So self-care is important. Doing something that client loves to do can help them build themselves up and to be resilient. So putting them in exercise or sports or some kind of music, that can help as well. And just finding some activities that can help them not sit in depressing thoughts, intrusive thoughts, or just things that are not helpful to their mental health, and just helping them stay hopeful. Think one of the parts of the recovery plan is to think of something that is worth living for. And many of the kids might say, well, my parents, or I had a goal of wanting to be in the NFL, something like that. And that's where they can start their goal from and start working towards that.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And so is the recovery plan similar to the safety plan, or is that something in addition to that?
Yeah, it's like in addition to it. So the safety plan is something that we actually do. I misspoke. Yeah, it's the safety plan. And then the recovery plan is something that is always there from the beginning of services with us. and that's where the treatment goals come from, and the coping skills are being built.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So now, if for the parents that are listening, if you are going through that process, that these are things that you can request and ask for, making sure you have that safety plan, the treatment goals, and a recovery plan on in place. And if the professional is not aware of those things, guess what? You've been educated and you can help them out. So thank you, Mr. Darius, with that. Miss Alexis, I wanted to ask you about are there any professional therapies, approaches for young adults who are dealing with thoughts of self harm that may be able to help them regain hope and find reasons to embrace life? Mr. Darius has spoken on the recovery plan, so I just wanted to ask you from that perspective.
Yes. So when it comes to thoughts of self harm, one therapeutic that I would definitely encourage behavioral therapy. And with that, that's usually the most or the most uh, lean forward when it comes to depression and who self harm, and the CBD reframe some how certain people. One that I work on are challenging with individuals who have either thought about self harm, have completed self harm, or have suicide. Have been able to challenge that cognitive distortion or that negative way of thinking, where instead of saying, okay, if one person doesn't like me, then no one likes me, being able to reframe that thought process and say, okay, well, if one person likes me, then that's just one person that doesn't like me, and being able to account for all the other individuals that like. So being able to
Mm-hmm.
identify what is the positive. Okay, does this one person carry the weight of people that still do like you? Um, and also be mindful of when we are faced with that all or nothing. How do we take a positive step ourselves to reframe the moment where we might say, okay, today's a horrible day. Okay, today might have been the best day, but how can I make it better before the day? Being able to identify ways to improve ourselves, and improve those thoughts that, um, and also with healthy coping skills that we have, and trying to work on healthier coping skills, because often self harm, usually when we have the absence of a healthy coping skill, absence of a healthy coping mechanism, we then enter into a negative one where that is cutting, burning, that might um, restriction on drink or blood flow, still feel, try to still have something, feel seen, feel alive, a safe approach to behavior. Um, or a group setting where individuals are encouraged to practice mindfulness and practice awareness in regard to what are the emotions, what are the triggers that cause an individual to self harm or want to self harm of what is causing the person in that situation to have that, you know, to self harm. Both both therapeutic modalities, both individual or in group settings with dialectical therapy, I respond to the groups where they have that sense of camaraderie. Okay, only only person going through often hope. Okay, I can do this. I can still go through life face or live. So I would recommend for
Thank you for sharing that, Alexis. For some reason, you are choppy, a little choppy, and you're kind of going in and out.
Uh-oh.
But I just want to kind of do a quick, just kind of paraphrase a little bit of what she said. I believe the main coping um, or effective therapy approach that she shared was CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And pretty much she just kind of spoke on being able to reframe that thought process, helping with reframing those thoughts, any negative thoughts that you're having, being able to turn that into positive thoughts, which then turns us into positive feelings. And now we got positive behavior. So that's the whole goal of what cognitive behavioral therapy is about. And she gave a lot of additional details as well. Some of it we got, Alexis, some of it we didn't. But thank you so much for sharing that with us. But that's the main thing that she was getting across to us, is that cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you guys want to look that up and find out more information on the cognitive behavioral therapy, that cognitive behavior therapy definitely is one that works for us. And I just want to do something a little different. I kind of want to hear everybody's perspective on this. And that's about social media, because we know that social media plays a major role in and mental health. You know, a lot of people don't like to talk about it or don't feel that it does, but I mean, the bulk of us, I mean, pretty much all of us, we spend a larger quantity of time on social media. And so it definitely can play a huge role in mental health, how we see ourselves, you know, with our self-esteem, our self-worth, like all of these different things. And I just want to get your perspectives on your thoughts about social media and how it's impacting this generation. Mr. Darius, you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'll go first. Um, yeah, social media can play a part into negatively affecting your mental health, and it can be positive. So, what I would suggest is to have a plan when you're on social media. So, if it's you scrolling through one of your favorite platforms, before you get on there, have a decision. Okay, what am I going to do when I click on this app? Am I going to look for certain things that's going to make me laugh, or am I going to go to talk to a friend or something of that nature? So instead of just scrolling, and letting time fly, and you get into a negative thought pattern, or you just keep scrolling through, and then you get off, and you don't feel like something was achieved, like. Yeah, for me, I try to like stay off of social media as much as possible, unless someone is trying to talk to me that only really talks to me through social media. So instead of being on the phone as much, I like to be more of a participant versus a spectator. So um, I would say, instead of being on social media and just watching someone do something, you could typically do that same activity, like closing your phone and going and doing it. So
Okay.
that's just my take on social media.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. That's a good way, you know, participate, don't just spectate. All right. Jessica, you want to share on social media?
Yeah. So I think, for me, I personally enjoy social media, but I think a lot of it is having some form of self accountability, right? Every now and then checking in. Does this, does this post, does this person make me feel good? Is this something that is healthy for me to be watching, and kind of being able to just have those check-ins? Because like Darius was saying, a lot of times it just leads to mindless scrolling. And even if we're not intently engaged with the stuff that we're seeing, it is still affecting us on some level, even if we're not consciously aware of it. And so I think a lot of times, especially in the past when I've worked with, younger women, a lot of times those beauty standards can be very, very debilitating whenever you're on social media all the time. and you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're thinking, why don't I look like that? Why isn't my life like that? Why can't I travel as much as they do? And we get into the game of comparison, which is never healthy. And so I think a lot of times just having that kind of accountability and being to sit back and say, okay, is the stuff that I am looking at right now productive? Is it healthy for me? How is this making me feel? If it's making me feel bad about myself, if it's making me get jealous, if it's making me compare, having these negative emotions, then it's probably time to cut back on some of that, or even something little like setting an alarm on my phone. So I'm only going to be on social media for, 15 minutes a day, something like that. I think can be very, very impactful on someone's mental health. And I know that a lot of younger women and a lot of women my age that I know personally go through phases where they'll just delete all of their social media, and then they'll miss it and they'll want to get back in and they'll jump full, head first back into it. And then a few months later, they'll delete it all. And I think, rather than that kind of full-fledged jump back and forth, I think a lot of it um, can also be helpful just to mediate what content you are watching, what content you are listening to, as well as limiting how much of my time am I spending on this thing. And so personally, I try to only, um, follow people that I know are positive influences, following, mental health stuff. Sometimes I like scrolling and I see a reminder that, um, you know, some mental health quote, my best today might not be my best tomorrow, and that's okay. Progress isn't linear, that kind of thing. And so I think it can be very helpful, and I think it can also be very hurtful. I think we just have to be um, pretty intentful with how we're using it and what kind of platforms and content we are subscribing to and really taking in. And so I think that there's good and bads to both sides, but I think that's when it comes, our job to kind of instigate some of that self accountability and that check in with how is this making me feel? Is this something that's healthy for me? And then also just being able to, be a bright spot in your friend's life, right? So I know that there's a lot of young women I know that struggle with social media. Um, I will, intentionally send them something nice on social media or something. You look beautiful today, something like that. So where even if they're getting all of this negativity, there can at least be some bright positive spots in there. And being really intentful with how I interact with other people on social media, because it really is. Something where you never know what someone's going through that day. And so, even just having some small, bright, positive interactions with people can really be very impactful overall, I think.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Jessica. And the thing that popped in my mind was, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what people are going through, and you get on there and you start speaking all of this negativity, and they may be in a suicidal space, and you just pushed them right on off the ledge. So thank you for sharing that, Jessica. Um, Alexis, you want to share?
Yes. When it comes to social media, something challenge my clients when they wake up in the morning. Then how do you your first wake up? That getting up, going to the restroom, brushing my teeth, or is that you on the side of the bed looking through Instagram, looking through TikTok, and now those 10 minutes have now turned into an hour that has been gone due to immediately entering into social media. I think Darius and Jessica kind of touched on the doom scrolling, where you're endlessly scrolling and there's really no purpose, there's really no intent to what you're, feeding your mind and feeding your energy in that moment, where it's like, okay, I'm on TikTok and it started with one video, now it's 10 videos, now I've got caught up into 20 videos, and now an hour and a half has passed, and the day is almost done. It's dark outside. Dinner hasn't been cooked. I haven't eaten anything yet, and now I'm trying to figure out at 9 o'clock what I'm supposed to eat. So being mindful of what we are viewing on a day-to-day basis. Is it serving a purpose? Is it, being of influence in a positive way? Because what I have witnessed is social media can be overstimulating to where we're seeing multiple views of people's lives that we don't know. We know celebrities, we might friend, we admire these celebrities, and we're looking at, okay, well, what does Beyonce have, and what does Cardi B doing, and who got into a fight last week? Everything can become overstimulating to where we're getting snippets and bits and pieces of people's lives on social media, and we think we know that person from these snippets and highlights that we're looking at, but we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We see a picture or we see a video that highlighted a moment of glam and fame and beauty, but we don't see what takes place in the background. And I think oftentimes, Jessica, she did, mention, oftentimes when it comes to those beauty standards, it alludes to that person looks like this all the time. This person is gorgeous and perfect, and no filter needed all the time. But we have to take into account that there are things that happen behind the scenes when it comes to social media that we don't see. And oftentimes young adults, they experience that comparison of, oh well, I wanna make money like the Kardashians. I wanna be like Beyonce. I wanna be able to have, my Range Rover, my G-Wagon. But there's things that took place in order for that to happen. And when we do run into that comparison of, oh well, I don't have this. Okay, but we can still work towards it. And just being cognizant of how often we're engaged on social media. There are days where I don't get on social media because sometimes it's depressing. If I'm seeing the same thing, the same event that is taking place, whether it be this, somebody who lost their lives, the same mass shooting, that can take a toll on somebody to where I have to say, let's take a break. So being mindful of when way, being able to unplug for a moment.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. I think we all needed to hear that. Thank you. We all need to unplug from social media. Yes, we all need to do that and practice that. And I think it's just the whole refresh. It's refreshing when you do. It will definitely refresh you. And I'll just throw out there that even watching the news as well on television, and the things that we put into our ears, the things that we see, all of those things can affect us emotionally and mentally. And we know that faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of God. And so if we know that hearing is like that's crucial. So if we're not hearing the word of God and we're hearing all this other stuff, I mean, what's gonna come by that? It ain't gonna be faith. So we just look at that and we want to do the right thing, when it comes to our spiritual relationship as well, because we got to mold that as well. And I just wanted to speak on, because we've talked about, people being supportive, people not knowing what to say, all of those different things when it comes to just making those connections and creating those safe spaces. What about those people that may have loved ones right now that are experiencing depression, whether it be anxiety, suicide, which all of that can contribute to suicidal thoughts and self-harm? And with these individuals, they may feel hesitant, to just get involved or assume that the issue will resolve on its own. Like they see it, they see the signs, they really don't want to fool with it. What guidance can you provide on how to overcome this reluctance and take appropriate action when they suspect that their loved one may be at risk?
I would definitely challenge them in regards to that reluctance. You don't want that reluctance to turn into resentment because you in the moment. You want to act proactive moment. Often are dealing with someone who is experiencing mental health troubles. It's more so an uncomfortable feeling of, okay, Do I say this? Do I say that? And oftentimes you feel like as if you're walking eggshells to not offend or to not upset them further. But if there's someone who is dealing with an individual experiencing depression, suicide thoughts, be proactive how you address it. But when I say proactive, not being aggressive. Not being aggressive towards them, not coming in a combative way, but being proactive in, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? I know, last week you had a challenging week. I've kind of seen you, I've observed you withdrawn the past couple days. Let's talk. Let's go for a walk. Oftentimes, be able to get out the house, getting out of the setting that may have caused the trigger or have caused the depression, get some vitamin D in. That's a great help for that individual. So starting off small in regards to those gestures and being comfortable with that, with having that conversation. You don't have to be well put or eloquent in how you approach the conversation, but sometimes you just have to ask someone, how are you doing? How's it going? Are you okay? Um, so I definitely encourage with that reluctance, we don't want to run into that resentment of I shoulda, coulda, woulda, but it, and now it's too late, and now we're dealing with the things of self-harm or even more drastic, a completed suicide.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
And I would also say is being a good listener. When you first start that conversation, of course, you're being intentional, saying, I've observed you. I've seen some things that are not typically what you would do. And then once they start opening up and talking, be the listener. When you talk about depression, it's something that they've been going through for a few weeks now, because they're having those onset signs of withdrawal, maybe not wanting to eat. They're probably not doing their favorite activities. So they've been going through that for a few weeks. So you have to have that patience to watch them recover. It's not going to just happen overnight just because you had that conversation one day. So that is important. Being a good listener and having that patience to see their recovery, and being gentle. Because you don't know what triggered them. You don't know what wounds are open, and you're trying to help and you're trying to do the right thing. So you have to be patient to see that recovery.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, patience is key, and being a listener. Thank you for that, Darius.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that I think a lot of people are hesitant to, ask someone or get involved because they feel like when they do, there will be some amount of responsibility placed on them. What if I ask this person if they're struggling with suicide and they say yes, then what do I do next? And then it's kind of, a lot of anxiety and really it causes a lot of uncomfort. Obviously, having those conversations, it's difficult. But I think that in the long term, it's one of those things where I have to sit back and say, okay, is my comfort in this moment more important than this person's safety, than this person's life? And so kind of being able to say, okay, I'm going to take those steps to be uncomfortable and try to be proactive in having this conversation rather than, ignoring it and letting it snowball into something worse. And so I think that it is important for people that are doing that, who are supporting loved ones that are struggling with suicidal thoughts, to also realize that they're not alone as well. And there's community resources to help with that. There's church groups, there's different community groups. There are, plenty of people out there that are there for support. And whenever someone is, responsible for, supporting someone else that has suicidal thoughts, I think it's really important that they themselves get help, get counseling, get whatever services they need, because it's a very difficult task. It can be very draining and it's a lot of emotions to deal with. And so I think that it's always better to try and get more support than you need than not getting any support at all. And so really taking those steps, and if someone you love has expressed some suicidal thoughts, One of the more practical things that you can do to be really supportive for them in the moment is, limiting access to lethal means. That's one of the things that they, train a lot of mental health professionals on is if I am friends with someone or I am a family member of someone who has expressed that they want to die by strangulation, then I'm going to try and take any belts, ropes, anything like that, maybe lock them away. Even just that kind of time distance, even if it's something that that person has access to. Um, Research shows that usually the impulse of suicidal urges tends to dissipate within 10 to 20 minutes. So even if, I don't have anyone that I trust to leave my gun or my medications with, or whatever method I may have that urge. Even if I don't have someone that I trust to leave that with, even something as simple as locking it in the trunk of your car so that there's time. By the time I, get ready, put my shoes on, walk out there, there's more time for those impulses to go away or me to change my mind or someone to reach out to me. So I think if we are aware that we know someone that's struggling with suicidal thoughts, struggling with mental health, being able to sit down with them and, like we were talking about earlier, have that safety plan, and then also find out what means of suicide attempt have they expressed an interest in the past, and being able to try and limit or restrict access to those means as much as possible.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And we have some questions coming in from our audience. This is for those families that are left behind from a family member who committed suicide. What are some things they can do to begin to heal their loss? And I think we kind of talked about that earlier. And if somebody would just like to chime in and answer that for us.
Sure. I would say,
We can't.
uh-oh, can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay, sorry about that. In regards to, family members with suicide, way moving forward in the process,
Okay, you're still going in and out. We're not getting anything.
uh-oh. Can y'all hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. Ways to be able to navigate moving forward in the healing process would be to honor that individual's memory. Oftentimes, when we faced with someone who has completed suicide, what we don't or people don't bring it up, close the bedroom door of where the person is staying. But being able to honor the good times, honor the memories, honor the positive times that you have with that individual allows you to navigate a little bit better. It does sting because a loss of a loved one from to suicide is a very great loss. But being able to honor that person in a positive way, remember what they like, even doing some things that they like in their memory, being able to still celebrate that person, celebrate that life. So if it's every birthday doing a balloon feast, or every Christmas still having that tradition that that individual liked, or making that dish that that person enjoyed for the holidays, still be to have their presence live on, so it's not this ghostly air that we feel, or I have to avoid celebrating this person due to how they chose to pass on. Still celebrating that they did while they were here, and still bring up that individual in a positive way. When there's family of like, oh well, their daughter, don't go there. We cause it. for the person's way.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Alexis, you're sharing some good information. So, definitely keep those memories alive. So she shared a lot about keeping those memories alive. I know she was a little in and out, but keeping those memories alive with your loved one. She talked about, the door being open to their room. Just all of these different things that you can do to create that. And I would just say a tradition of what you would do, because those anniversaries are going to continuously come up, whether it be Christmas, whether it be the holidays. She talked about their favorite meals that they like, you being able to go in and recreate those meals, during those times. So just being able to have that connection and keeping that connection, because I think that's the biggest fear when our loved ones pass away, is forgetting what they look like, forgetting what they like, forgetting how they sounded, all of these different things. So she shared a lot of great information. We have another question. Did we have another question from the floor? How do we help young adults manage realistic and reasonable expectations? All right. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, what I've learned about goal setting is it is something that you want to do that is tangible, something that you can grab and reach. So for something to be realistic for a young adult, if they're, say, just thinking about education, right? Miss Walker had talked about how we have this cookie cutter thought of we go from high school, college, and we get the job, but sometimes that plan doesn't always go how we thought it would. So making things tangible, as far as saying, okay, this first year, I'm a freshman in high school. I just want to, get used to being in high school. My first year, I'm going to try to make a couple friends, you know, um, get get the good grades that I want, instead of thinking about, okay, I just got to graduate, because you're thinking about stuff so far ahead, and that's how anxiety sets in. So being realistic, and if it's something about suicide or harmful thoughts, just thinking about something realistic, as in what can I do today versus what I'm going to be at in a couple months or a year, that can help someone stay grounded into the thought pattern of, I'm helping myself right now. I'm building myself up for right now so I can face tomorrow. Realistic goals is, just something that you can grab and touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Darius. All right. Would anybody else like to share on that?
Yeah, I would. I think it's also really important whenever setting goals and setting like what are realistic expectations for someone, or from yourself personally. I think it's really important to. A lot of times we have big goals, big aspirations, right? I want to get my degree. I want to be a doctor. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to get a car. And a lot of times those big goals can be very overwhelming whenever we start looking at them. So a lot of times, breaking down those goals into smaller, more obtainable pieces, right? Instead of my goal being, I want to buy a car, maybe my goal should be, I want to save $100 each month up to get that car. Maybe I want to break those goals down into something more attainable. Maybe instead of my goal just being broadly to graduate college, my goal right now should be, I want to apply to, a scholarship a week, or I want to apply to the program. Something that are smaller, more obtainable goals that we can break down and manage a little bit better, because also, people change, people grow. What goals I might have for myself this year might be different in 5 years. And so being able to, I think, also break those pieces down into smaller goals can also be beneficial for if those long-term goals change some.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those long-term goals are goals that we have for ourselves can be something that is maybe unattainable. So even, I want to have a family. I want to be married by 30. I want to do this. I want to do that. And sometimes the reality of it is God has a different plan for us. And so being able to be flexible with our long-term goals as well, I think is really, really important. And so setting those short-term, achievable, attainable goals is a much more realistic way to look at life. And I think also it helps us to stay more present, focused, more, aware, more in connection with the ones around us whenever we are focused on more short-term goals and having kind of an awareness of where we are in the present. So,
Wow, thank you so much for that. All right. And so I just want to check in and see, do we have any more questions from our audience? And by the way, you all have done a great job. What is one tip you would give family members and young adults struggling with depression and passive thoughts, suicidal thoughts, and ideations? So one tip. Each of you want to share a tip?
Sure. Who with depression was one practice. Oftentimes when you run past of oftentimes the concept of why is the person sad, why is the person upset, or why are they depressed when we get them, or you right when what but also when person will not open that what makes the focus that person off will open up and say what doing something cause them to depress. So being there to support, quote unquote, ownership of that home, the support, why they doing that, what and so provide support.
Okay.
What uh, fixing your upper because sometimes that takes first, but able to what I'm present for, what do you for me?
Okay. So, Alexis, thank you so much for that. Since you're still going in and out, if you could post um, just a quick summary of what you were sharing, and we're going to post it because I know you were sharing some really good information to kind of help us with that. Did anybody else want to share on that?
I would say, it's a little summary of just it's okay not to be okay. First, acknowledge that those passive thoughts, you're going through that struggle. It is a battle, every day. So understand that there's going to be some people around you that care for you, love on you, and will want to see you recover and have that healing and see you on the other side of that hope. And instead of being in that down spot, they're going to be there to help you. So first, acknowledge that it's okay not to be okay.
Thank you, Darius. Jessica?
yeah, I think that a lot of it too is being able to do research and realize, get connected with some community groups. There's a lot of peer support groups out there for parents that have children with mental illness, for people, friends, family members that have lost loved ones by suicide. There are support groups for people that struggle with suicidal thoughts. And so I think even if maybe counseling is something maybe you aren't ready for yet, even just getting plugged in a community surrounding by other people can be really, really beneficial in letting you realize you're not alone. You know, those being able to share those struggles with other people. Research shows that talking about a lot of the struggles you're going through, even if it's not talking with someone, even if it's just journaling or talking to yourself in the mirror, just verbalizing those struggles tends to have better results long term of mental recovery. And so just being able to share what's going on, either in a um, peer support group or counseling, or a church group, small group, that kind of thing. Being able to express some of your struggles, I think, is really important long term in helping with that recovery. Just not letting those emotions get bottled up.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Jessica. And I love the you're not alone. Just that whole concept and that thought process, and having the support backed around you. And I just want to kind of summarize what Alexis was sharing when regarding her tip is just being mindful, when a loved one is experiencing suicidal thoughts or depression, to allow that individual to tell you how you can show up for them and be present for them in their challenging times. So thank you for that, Alexis, for sharing that with us. Because we know that's definitely important. And again, that's where that communication come in, and listening, so that they can share with you what their needs actually are, rather than you just assuming what those needs are. Do we have any more questions from our audience? All right. So I think at this time, we do not have any more questions from our audience. Again, I want to thank you all for attending this event today. Um, I don't want to leave without sharing where we can contact you guys. Any resources that you all may be aware of, feel free. You guys can share that at this time.
So regards in regards to resources, our experience, a love battling with thoughts of suicide thoughts or attempts, definitely do not hesitate in regards to calling the suicide hotline. That change for now 9 being able to utilize a resource. It is a 24-hour service hotline for individuals who are experiencing thoughts of suicide, thoughts of harm, having those low moments. There are mental health professionals and individuals that are there to provide services for you. Um, I also highly encourage, when we are talking about mental health, it is okay to go to therapy. It is okay to, request help and receive help from therapy. Is not a bad thing. Therapy is not a negative. Still be saved and still go to therapy. You can, still be in the word and need Wellbutrin. It's AO. That is something that is available for you. Don't allow that to not a resource that I utilize. Myself, I work in a setting. If it is to an extent that you are needing inpatient hospitalization to be stabilized, that is okay. It's just on it earlier today in regards to of having to go to a hospital. We'd rather you go there than having to play or having negative consequences of mental health. So that part and it does receive that assistance where needed.
All right. Thank you, Alexis. And Alexis, if you could drop your information in the chat, Thank you for that. She said you can be in the Word and still be on Wellbutrin. I like that. So we don't want to think that just because we spiritual that we can't we don't need therapy and we don't need that other stuff. I mean, sometimes it's needed. And if it's needed and you've been diagnosed, then maybe you need to do a little bit more self-examination and whether doing your own self-examination on the physical side, we want you to do it spiritually. But get off of social media trying to diagnose yourself and Google trying to find out a diagnosis and go let the professionals handle that part. I have many clients that come to me with already done diagnosed themselves. And I'm like, if you didn't already diagnose yourself, ain't nothing I can do for you. All right. Jessica, would you like to share your information or share some resource, whatever you want to share?
Yeah. I mean, I just encourage anyone to do their own research and try to find resources specific to whatever struggles they're going through. I mean, you'd be really, really surprised. I know that I was when I first started working in the mental health field at really all of the resources, organizations, very niche community groups that are just there for supporting individuals that have, whatever specific mental health struggle it is. So I know that, MHMR has a lot of resources. But even outside of that, there's a lot of nonprofits that have very, very specialized resources for things. So even just doing a quick Google search of, something that, so someone starts, for example, someone struggling with suicide, finding something that is a good coping skill for you. And if it's something that's not possible for you in that moment, doing some research. A few weeks ago, I came across a nonprofit in Denton that gives free art supplies to people who have mental illnesses. And that if that's your coping skill, if you can't afford it, do some research. Try to, find those communities and find those organizations out there that are there to help you specifically for whatever you're going through. And it's never anything to be ashamed of when you need to get help or when you want resources. That's why they're there. So not carrying that shame around or not feeling like scared to reach out, to use the suicide hotline, to utilize mental health resources, because that's what they're there for. And they're always in spaces of, no judgment. And so I think just also being able to swallow our pride sometimes and being able to, come in humility whenever we need those resources to find them and use them, because that's what they're there for. So.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Jessica. And if you don't mind, if you any resources that you have, maybe the art supply, if you don't mind dropping those resources in the chat, that would be great. Thank you so much. Mr. Darius?
Yeah, so Denton County MHMR, we also have one in Tarrant County. Those places are there for us. And then also we have a loss program, which would be for the public and people who are clients at MHMR. And what that program is for people who have lost someone to suicide. So it's a community group for those people, and it's free to the public and to people who already are clients. So I encourage anyone who's lost someone to suicide to look into that program. You can just quick Google search Denton County MHMR or Tarrant County, and you'll find our loss program as one of the community resources that we have.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Darius. And I'm just going to share that here at Antioch Christian Fellowship, we do not only serve our local community, but we are serving people all across the globe, as we do have an online presence. And so for anybody that may be watching that may not be in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Denton, Tarrant County areas that they have shared at this point, definitely NAMI is available which is a national organization that you can reach out to. 988 is there that they have shortened. And I think I heard Alexis share about that as well. So 988, anybody can reach that if you're having suicidal thoughts or ideations. Check with your local counties, whatever county that you're in. Most counties have mental health programs. Here in our area, I know we can dial 211 to get extra resources and help as well. But check with your local counties, whatever state or wherever you are, and they should be able to guide you in the right direction. And your local ERs, emergency rooms, also, you can get help there as well. And so I would just like to thank all of you for participating on today. And Jessica has shared with us LOSS is the name of the organization that provides the art. So the art room in Denton is the name of it.
Yeah, the art room in Denton is it's separate from LOSS, but it is for mental health, people who struggle with mental health.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Jessica. And so again, you all reach out to your local counties if you need any additional information. And again, just thank you all for attending today. And it wouldn't be, I can't end this without just giving praises to God and thanking Him for allowing us to be in this on this online presence right now, and you guys coming in and providing all of the information that you all have provided. We know that it's important that we have that spiritual relationship. That's like our number one when it comes to our mental health. We got to make sure we're being spiritually fed as well, and not just being physically fed with social media. So we got to be, but there's some spiritual stuff on social media too. You just got to make sure you're not tapping into the wrong stuff. So you got to be careful with that as well. So again, thank you all for attending, and hopefully we will be able to have you guys back again. And thank you, social media, for tuning in as well. Everybody that's on Facebook and wherever you're watching, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you all.